This spotlight examines the drug problem in the region through the lived experiences of a former addict, from addiction to salvation, and everything in between. In what turns out to be a story of battling the beast to stay off the edge, Davidfolaranmi, who currently owns and runs a drug rehabilitation center in Enugu State dedicated to rehabilitating drug users, shares his story.
Okay, so it all started. First of all, my first exposure to drugs came in my undergraduate. I was a student of Covenant University, and in my 200 level, a couple of friends asked me to come with them to where is currently the university library. It was an incomplete building at the time. And then I saw people smoking and drinking and using marijuana. And so this created an impression on my mind because while they did that, I saw some of the immediate effects it had on them. But I didn't indulge at the time because I had a fairly decent Christian background. So I went back to my hostel, started brooding over the things I'd seen, but I decided not to partake in it. But that impression was created on my mind. A few years later, I went to the UK for my master's. I lived with 2 Europeans who were always doing drugs in the flat. We shared a flat together. And then they were always, David, come join us. David, come join us. And then eventually I decided to experiment and tried out some substances, marijuana, mushrooms, ketamine, cocaine. All of this was an experimentation stage just to fuel my curiosity. But shortly afterwards, I got addicted. And then it just spiraled out of control.
When did you notice you were getting addicted?
So I came back to Nigeria, and a friend of mine introduced me to crack cocaine. I'd never used crack in the UK. When I got back to Nigeria, I started using crack, and it happened in August, and by December of that same year, I spent over 3 million naira. I'm talking about 2011. So this was all of my savings. And then I started selling my property, sold my car, sold all the furnishings in my house, and then took back my rent from the landlord. When I got my rent back from the landlord, I now moved to the bunks, that's the trap houses, where people just sit down, buy drugs and live there. So when I got to that point, I knew I was hooked. I knew I was addicted.
How close-knit was your family? How well did you get along with your father, your mom, your siblings, and how much attention did they give you growing up?
Growing up, we were quite a close-knit family. Of course, every family has their issues, but my mom tried as much as she could to shield us from the things that were wrong in and outside of our family, so we weren't exposed to these things. And so I have 2 younger brothers. We were really close with my mom and dad. So a lot of attention was paid to our upbringing. And then we usually did things as a unit, as a family unit.
So when you left your nest, that's your family, did your friends also indulge in this?
Yes, I did have a few friends who struggled with the addiction. I lost 4 friends in total, but then 2 were really close to me. The guy died of, well, the autopsy said it was, there was a mixture of several drugs in his system, right? But we who were close to him knew that he could take that much and not pass out. So we suspected that he had, because at that time in Abuja, there was a lot of adulterated substances where these dealers mix it with other chemicals to increase their products. So sometimes this could be very lethal. And I strongly believe that that was the case with him. Now, the lady, she died at the age of 21. We were good friends, like I said, was older than her. She lived in London. And then she called me, said she was going to have a party and she needed to buy drugs. So I told her to go to Camden Town and told her to get from a particular person, which she did. And then coming back, she was on BlackBerry, chatting me up and saying, "Oh, she got this," and there was a lot. So immediately I got worried because I knew she was going to be alone at home before the party the next day when people start coming. So I tried to tell her, make sure you don't use up all of these substances on your own. We just joked about it and she said, don't worry, I'm going to be fine. So that night, I kept on trying to keep in touch with her and she kept on saying, no, don't worry, I'm fine. But by the time it was morning, I couldn't reach her anymore. And then I suspected something might have gone wrong. So I called some of my friends who lived around the area to please go and check up on her. They got there, they couldn't get into the house. They called 999 and then paramedics came. She had passed out already.
What was it like for you when you had to move to the bunks?
It was the beginning of my new reality, right? So before I ever moved to the bunks, what I was used to was calling and the dealer would bring the supply. So today I took my money back from my landlord, my year's rent. The next day, the day I took it from him, I was calling the dealers. The dealers felt I didn't have any money, so they didn't come. So somebody overheard me on the phone making these calls and said, why don't I take you to where you can buy these things, an open field, you don't need to call anybody. So that was the first time I ever even knew there was a place like a bunk. So I got there and the first thing that hit me was young persons looking tattered, battered, all, struggling with addiction. And then I went to see the dealer. He was the only neatly dressed person there. That's usually the case because they don't use the drugs. So I spent all of that money there. In 4 days, I spent 750,000 naira. Then I started living there. So that was the lowest of the low because these places are filthy. You have people throw up there. I mean, you sleep on the floor. It's not like there's a convenient place to sleep. No, the toilets are just where you live. You see used menstrual rags everywhere. And so that became my new reality. Somebody said, welcome home. And truly, it became home for me. It was terrible, but I couldn't live there because of the addiction. So everybody there didn't want to be there, but couldn't get out of the place.
What does dependency feel like? Because it's easy to tell someone, stop taking these drugs. But dependency must feel some kind of way.
Dependency is bondage. It's prison. Now let me explain how the cycle works. So you use the drug, take for instance heroin, which is an opioid. It's a downer. You use the drug, it makes you feel relieved, not high anymore. So there's no ecstasy, there's no feel-good feeling anymore. It just makes you be able to function, to get up, go to where you can ease yourself, eat. Now, once that wears out, right, you begin to feel sick immediately. Pains in your joints, diarrhea sets in, you start throwing up, you start stooling on yourself. So the moment you're able to get your fix back, which we call curing in the bunks, because it's literally you're sick. So you get your curing, which is your fix, and everybody has his or her dose of what is going to make him feel better. Once you get that dose, it feels like, yeah, I'm back. Your joints are better, your sight is better, all of your senses are better. You're not high anymore. You're not getting that euphoria of being high. You're not excited anymore. You're just normal. So dependence is bondage. You're not doing it for the euphoria of it. You're now doing it just to function, just to live your life.
And that's what a cure for wellness feels like. So let's talk about the law. Did you ever have any run-ins with the law?
Severally. So the majority of the time I used drugs, I was in Abuja. So because I started doing despicable things to fuel my addiction, so I had several run-ins with the law. Most prominent among them was February 14th, Valentine's Day of 2014. My friends and I got arrested by the NDLEA in Abuja. We're taken to their office in Gudu. Now, this was because there was a sting operation where we lived, the estate where we lived. I had briefly come out of the bunk. So I put up with another lady who was using drugs and another friend of mine. So all three of us lived in her house. And then there was one of the dealers who had a problem with, usually people drop collateral. So sometimes I might borrow your car, say, Natalie, I want to just get down there, and I take it and give it to a dealer. Then you get angry and get the police. So the dealer had that issue. So the NDLA was after him, and he was bringing drugs to us. So they arrested us and arrested him together. It was like a scene out of a movie, you know. So they took us there to their station in Enugu, went through some counseling, and then were referred to rehabilitation centers. But aside that, I had run-ins with the law of the police a lot of times.
What kind of losses did you suffer because of this addiction?
We'll start from financial, which I think millions of naira. In the first year, like I said, I spent 3 million naira. After then, maybe I usually tell people I probably spent 15 million naira that I can account for in cash in the 7 years I used drugs. Now, this is aside things that I spontaneously sold and gave out as collateral that never came back. So I lost those things. Then there's my international passport with my visas in it. I gave it out as collateral. I never got it back because the dealer just disappeared off the surface of the earth. These are tangible things. Then what about my physical health? You know, I struggled. If you notice, I walk with a limp, a bit of a limp. That's because I had a drug-induced accident in 2015, November, where my leg was fractured. Should have been amputated, but for the mercies of God, you know, so it took its toll on my health also. And then I became estranged from most of my friends. Till this very day, there are people that just want to keep their distance from me because that stigma of he was an addict for 7 years and did all these despicable things. Some people don't want to even relate to me anymore, you know, so yeah.
So what impact did you see this having on your family? And by the time you did get married, had you already stopped, or was your wife a part of the process, your recovery process?
I know I stopped. Okay, I'll take this from the under. I'd stopped, then I met my wife and I told her everything because I was writing a book at the time. So I was giving her to review the book, and this was like my true life story. So she knew step by step. I took her back to the bunks. I said, look, this is where I used to live. So she knew everything that was happening, and then we got married and started the work we're doing together. What impact did my drug use have on my family? It broke us, because in Africa, they say when a child does well, it's the father. And then when he has a problem, it's the mother. So my father blamed my mom. How you spoiled him. You were always giving him money. You sent him to the best schools. You did this, you did that, you did this, you did that. So there was that fracture in the family unit. And then my youngest brother didn't want to just think about his older brothers being an addict, so he just shut down.
How do you stay off the edge?
I have my coping mechanisms, right? I think I spoke about some when we had the interview the other day on TV. So I have my coping mechanisms. Some people call them relapse prevention techniques. We have visualizations where you set a particular image, picture, or video in your mind. And then when the thought, the urges, or the cravings come to use substances, you quickly substitute it with that image and visualize it for as long as you can. Some people practice yoga, mindfulness. There's the rubber band snap. I think I've overgrown that now, but I advise people who are just starting their recovery journey to use the rubber band snap. And then, more importantly, is to master how to manage the urges and the cravings when it comes. I always tell people this: whether you're an addict to drugs, sex, food, gambling, sleep, the urges come like the waves of an ocean. Could be very overwhelming. But just like the way the waves recede, those urges recede. It takes 10 to 15 minutes maximum. Talk to anybody about it. It doesn't exceed 15 minutes. It's going to go back. So if you can manage what you do with those 10 to 15 minutes, it's very important. If you're my accountability partner, for instance, when I have the urge, I should pick up the phone and call you. Your number should be on speed dial. And I should have already told you about my struggles before this. So whatever it is you're doing, when you see my call, you should pick up. For instance, let's say your phone is off, then you might have the rubber band snap. You know, you keep snapping it on your wrist. It sends a jolt of, you know, to your mind and makes you forget that thing at least temporarily.
So you are a Yoruba man that has decided to stay in Enugu.
Yes.
What made you stay back?
I was already a few years clean when I moved to Enugu. And then, excuse me, I went for a training with the UN. That's when the Nigerian Drug Survey report came out by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. And till this day, that's the go-to report survey we have. Of course, we're due for another one because we're talking about 2018. But till now, if you want any statistics, that's what we refer to. So in that document, we found out that there's a high prevalence of drug use in the Southeast, which I'm sure you know from some of the, and then the treatment centers here were very minimal. Prevention programs were also at the school, maybe primary or secondary school levels. Nothing was being done in the tertiary or higher institutions. So I spoke to my wife, and my team at the time were based in Abuja. And I said, look, let's move to the Southeast. And they said, oh, David, you're crazy. How can you go to a place you don't know? I said, no, my wife schooled in Enugu. She's from Abia State. So at least we know 2 states. We'll start from there. We came here, we went around, went to the neuropsychiatric hospital, we saw the director. We went to NDLA, we introduced ourselves and what we had come for. And then we set up a small drop-in center in the 9th Mile area. That's after Ngo of Enugu State. What we're doing there was just offering psychosocial support to walk-in clients who had struggles with drug use. And then that's how we eventually came in. So I think, would I call it a business decision? Probably it was. Your second question, why is it that people who struggle with addiction move to other states? Now, the environmental factor is one of the most potent triggers that can make a person relapse, right? So if you're used to using drugs in a particular location and you're trying to start the journey of sobriety, you can easily relapse. Somebody says you can't get healed in the same environment where you got sick. So you can easily relapse in that environment. Once you see familiar images, roads, streets, places you've used, it triggers that desire to want to use again. So once you're out of a place totally, and this is for people who want to stop. So I come to Enugu newly, for instance, let's say I was using in Lagos. I come to Enugu newly, I don't know anybody. It's going to be very difficult for me to just stop a keke man and say, take me to where they are selling crack. I mean, it's going to be difficult. So that gives you a new foundation that you can build on. So once you get stronger, you can now start visiting the places where you were before.
From run-ins with the law to staying off the edge, David is not the only one who has experienced the perils of drug addiction but sought timely intervention. His patients share similar stories, and one of such patients with immense dedication to stay off the edge turned staff.
Okay, I was really using more of marijuana, codeine, and Refnol. But I thank God my being here has made me put a stop to that. And I now think of better ways of helping myself and doing things that will help me in life than just depending on drugs. Majorly, it was more of depression that led me to using drugs.
It started when I was in school. I never had a very good relationship with my dad. He was strict, and in his own way, he wanted the best for me, but he kept pushing, and I thought I would never be good enough for him. So one day we had a really bad argument, and I was just walking by the halls of my school, and someone suggested it to help me relieve stress, and that was it. I spent 8 million in 1 month. I woke up in a hotel room with 8 strangers that I did not know. And I just figured that this is crazy. I can't continue living like this. So I have a lot of people that I introduced to substance myself. So when I am done with my treatment, I intend to slowly, I won't just get into it, but I will slowly begin to set up a system where I can myself help people.
Others migrating from an innocent child to a victim of peer pressure, living in the bunks, and finally a drug rehabilitator. Saving lives of others was an unlikely outcome, but nonetheless a story of survival. Will David stay off the edge? Judging by his decisions, it appears the stakes are quite high in his favor.